Fill my drink real quick, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, we're live. That doesn't mean anything though. Nobody's watching
Okay.
probably. But it is record. It's also our method of recording. So I'll pause. I'll mute um until Seth's back, and then
Okay.
I'll jump. If you could just mute at that point. Oh shit! Hold on.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay, good. So we're streaming. Confirmed. Close that. All right, sorry. I started getting feedback from my from the stream. But anyways, yeah. So we're recording. So when Seth comes back, everybody can mute. We'll go ahead and launch the intro, and then Seth basically intros the guest.
Okay,
Yep.
sounds good.
Dope. Penguin, if you're doing things, you're muted.
Oh, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do it. 3, 2, 1. And we're back. Welcome back to the Agora Podcast. It's Penguin here with my co-host, Seth Agora. We're coming at you live. We are streaming live for our patrons. And if you're listening to this in recording, which I'm sure in this case you are, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today we have another episode of our Women of Anarchism series, or Women in Anarchism, as all of our guests so far have been women that are alive and actively anarchist. So Seth, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guests if you don't have any announcements?
Nope, no announcements. Today we're bringing Katron. Katron's a friend from Twitter. She's an overall shit poster, and I actually don't know her that well, so I'm going to kind of let her introduce herself. Katron, welcome to the Women in Anarchism series. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Doing all right. Pretty tired.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day here. We've been working outside all day, so.
Yeah, we're having like pretty awesome weather too. It's just been really nice. It finally feels like spring, so I'm really, really, really happy about that.
Yeah, I love spring. So like I told you before we started, why don't we start with your thoughts? Let's go with thoughts on anarchism. Like, what is anarchism to you?
Essentially just being able to have your own self-autonomy, just to do, obviously not essentially what you want to do, right? But having that your own self-thoughts, essentially, and being your own individual self.
Right on. How long have you been an anarchist?
Honestly, it started. I don't know if I should just go like through like how it all came to be, but so basically, I come from a home where my parents were social, like they're dem socks essentially. So for me, I started like getting a lot of this ideology pushed onto me. So me rebelling against what my parents were essentially brought me to, being a libertarian. So I think from then on, I decided that start doing more reading, and just as I kept getting more into like like writers and shit like that. So I started then I went through the whole like anarcho-capitalism ideology, and essentially now I'm more of a egoist, I guess.
Right on. How long ago was this? Like, how long did that journey take you, I guess?
Well, this all started in my teens, like that's when I started getting into it, because that's essentially, and it came along too because I met a lot of people within the punk community. I started going to shows and started doing a lot of that, and essentially they introduced, they started talking to other libertarians within the punk community, And essentially that carried over to college, and I started reading more. And then that's basically, I would say, like in my early 20s that I started getting more into like anarchism, started identifying as an anarcho-capitalist. And then essentially, once after the coup situation happened, then, like that's when I started becoming like I started moving away from that, and I became an egoist.
That's an interesting journey because I went through. My path was very similar in that I was very into the punk scene, but also got pretty heavily into anarcho-capitalism for a lot of years. And I did not meet. I met a lot of other anarchists, but I did not meet a lot of other punk ANCAPs, but by any means. But so awesome. Well, so what? Something I've been trying to just. I don't know what the word is for it, but like gather or get at is like, what do you think might be a unique perspective? You as as a woman, what is the a unique perspective or a unique sort of wisdom about anarchism that you might have obtained or have?
With me more, this is a really hard one to answer. I feel like, and I guess I don't even know how to like kind of word it, because it's just, you know, well, with me, I feel like it's led me to a path of, just kind of like learning more things about myself, learning more, like essentially just doing, stuff like for my own, especially like around like COVID time, like I started like doing like a lot of gardening, just kind of things like that. So I really wouldn't say that I'm sorry, I'm just like super nervous right now. So I'm just like, I don't know how
Oh
to
no,
answer
that's
this question.
you're all good. Ramble away. If you don't ramble, I will. So just go ahead and ramble.
So in that particular perspective, and it's also, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just like super nervous right now. I don't do these things, so I'm just like, ah.
No, it's
Um,
weird. It's weird and awkward. Don't worry about it.
okay. All right, so yeah, so I would say it's, just kind of learning a lot, to do like different things, about myself, and just being able, to just be who I am, in my own individual self, I would say. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a constant journey for me. I've never stopped moving around and bouncing around different ideas myself. Like I've never reached a plateau, and I don't think you're supposed to. But even as a podcaster, like I am completely in flux and learning new things every day. And I know for me, like podcasting, it's not because I'm an authority on anything. I think you can like having a podcaster that's like really got a bunch of done a lot of studies and very credentialed person, and also is a great speaker and knows a lot of people, and he could totally be authority on some things. I'm not. I'm just trying to share the things that I'm learning and mostly listening on other podcasts with the audience that I think would really enjoy the distilled ideas. But yeah, you really sound like a lot of our audience. I think comes from a very similar path. I come from a little bit different path, a little bit different trajectory. Definitely don't come out of like the punk scene or anything like that. But I think that's very much a common story of our little community. I think that we have around this podcast for sure. So you definitely fit right in here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do all like just, from being online or whatever. I think I've met some amazing people, even though it might not be like exact ideology, we kind of just like share a lot of similar things. You don't see, it's funny because like you were mentioning earlier, you don't meet a lot of ANCAPs. Granted, I don't gonna identify as an ANCAP anymore, but at the time, you didn't meet many ANCAPs that, within the punk scene. And it was kind of cool, like once you start, like I started getting on Twitter at the time, like this was a little bit, like maybe 2017 or whatever, and I started meeting a lot of people that were, ANCAP and listened to punk and whatever. And I was like, it's awesome that it's just you could find that small community just within, Twitter, or just that app or whatever.
Yeah, for real. That's a pretty. You can find whatever little niche interest you want on the internet. Whatever you're into, you can find somebody else who's into it. Um. So what was it? Just reading Stirner that kind of drifted you away from anarcho-capitalism, or was it something else?
Um,
How
it
was
was
that journey like?
probably that. I started essentially, yeah, it was basically just like reading a lot into like Stirner, and that I think the thing that kind of like drifted me away from that is the fact that I really just started seeing, and this is my own personal opinion, whether you think that or not, essentially up to you, but I just started, really seeing that the faults within, capitalism itself as well, like it essentially goes crony, and it's just it's unfortunate, but it really does. So it's just a lot of that, I would say, that kind of just drifted me away from that particular belief system, and it's just, that's what I would say happened essentially. It wasn't like this like whole like super like complex like journey with that, but that's essentially what happened.
Yeah, pretty similar here too. Although it took me 10 years to go through that journey, but um so let me circle back here. What was your politics before you were, I mean, you said your parents were democratic socialists, but like what was did you have a political identity before you got into anarchism, or is it straight to, nothing to anarchism?
Oh, I was a libertarian.
Oh, sure. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like
So
LP libertarian.
yeah, like LP libertarian,
Okay, okay.
which my parents didn't like quite a lot, but it was funny because I remember the first time that I voted, it was like the only time I've ever voted. I was for what was the 2008 bar? Was it Bill Barr? Well, like I
Oh
think that
God,
was his
yeah,
name.
bar. Yeah,
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 I fucking voted for him,
yeah.
and that's the only time I've ever voted.
Don't feel bad. I voted for Ron Paul in '08. So, um, I was at least politically. Oh, I see. I had been an anarchist for a long. I'm old. I might be a little older than you, but I'd been an anarchist for a while by that point, and I knew enough about Bill Barr that I'm like, that guy is fucking CIA. Like, it's just
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
not into it at all. So I did get sucked into the Ron Paul thing for a minute, but yeah, no, I wasn't into Barr. I probably would have voted for Brown, during that time if I was a little more cared about politics a little bit more. But uh, that was a while ago. That was back in 2000 or something. But anyway, so nothing to libertarian to anarchist. Well, at least that's not a bad. That's not bad at all. That's a decent path. Um, some people, it takes a long journey through a lot of other stuff before they get to anarchism. So yeah, I think in some ways you're fortunate. Do you think that way, or?
Um, Honestly, it was just honestly, and I'm gonna be quite like frank with you. Like the only reason that I even like drifted into being a libertarian is because more of like just kind of like go against the grain with my parents, because I was like, I'm not gonna be like you. I don't want to read all those stupid socialist like books, and so it was more of a me being rebelling against my parents essentially. But then essentially I ended up finding I'm like, oh, this is actually something I'm really into. So yeah, I guess it was kind of lucky to try to rebel against my parents because it took me through that path.
Yeah, no, that's classic. When you said your parents were into democratic socialists and everything, or whatever they were into, but I think that sometimes these things are a little bit cyclical. Like right now, ideas in general on the left, especially like the progressive left, there's some sort of like intermediate type of socialist ideas are kind of, I don't know, ascendant, but they're sort of accepted by the mainstream more than they would have been in the past. Maybe that's a little more complicated than in reality than it actually is, but I could see totally, because of that cyclical nature of the thing, that now, or several years ago, this makes a lot more sense, that being a libertarian is all of a sudden like rebellious and punk in a way that it may not have seemed to be that way in like a previous generation and everything. And so I mean, it totally makes sense. Those ideas still, totally make a lot of sense and everything. But we've got to find something past the standard electoral route, and I think everybody has to have something to stand on other than kind of the LP, which doesn't seem to stand on much.
Oh no, it's I mean, just kind of looking back, just like essentially that's one of the things that kind of pushed me into more into being a ANCAP at the time, was because I was going to like meetings and stuff with my local chapter. And I remember because they used to have a 1 monthly meeting that they used to hold on Thursdays. And so I remember at the time that I was at one of these meetings, because even though I was a libertarian, I'm still very consistent with the fact that I'm very like anti-border. But I remember like once it started, because at the time, during the time, like I was also, sorry, I'm just kind of like scattering with this, but I started reading more like anarchist theory. Like I was like reading Spooner, I was reading Emma Goldman, so I was just reading different schools of it. Um, and so I remember like I was the last meeting that I went to, and the chair at that meeting started going on a rant about how like we should be closing borders, like blah blah blah. I'm like, you know what? I'm fucking done with these people. Like this shit is insane. Like I just couldn't identify with them, because I come from, like I came to this country illegally, obviously, like I have a lot of family members that are illegal. So I was like, you know what? This is bullshit. You guys claim to be like anti-government, anti-state, yet you are preaching this ideology, which is contradicting to what you're saying you are.
Yeah, it's the problem with labels, I think. And that's why, like, I think you get to a certain point, and I don't know you very well. I don't know, like, how old you are, but I know I hit a point where, well, I hit a point originally where, like, yeah, a lot of times it was tongue in cheek, all the crazy different labels that just really kind of pseudo leftist, like just spouting jargon and labels and everything. But it's like, really, like, you want to label these people this people this, these people this. But I don't have, like I kind of alluded to before, I don't have any kind of crazy labels for what I am or what I believe. This hyphen this hyphen this. Eventually, you just kind of learn a lot, and you kind of stand on your own reputation for what you're known as saying. So it gets really hard when you try to create a group, label it the libertarian, and libertarian can mean like 50 different things, and you have no idea what you're walking into. I ran into something very similar when I first started listening to like libertarian radio programming, and I was like, oh, why don't I go check out the libertarian meeting? And oh my God, it was probably even worse. It was notoriously bad. Well, I later found out they're notoriously bad, but oh my God, it was worse. It was as bad as you described. The worst they were doing. Let's see, they started with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer or something. I forgot. It was definitely the pledge. No, it was a prayer too. Which, and you know what? I have not come to terms with the Pledge of Allegiance or really having the Lord's Prayer at a libertarian meeting. It's just kind of self-defeating if you want to attract large groups of people. I've really come to terms with, if you want to be a conservative, that's fine. But yeah, you really don't know what you're walking into, and that's why I think people find a lot of more solace on the internet. We're able to actually connect with a lot more like-minded people and cross-pollinate each other through the internet. Without the internet, we wouldn't have this podcast or most podcasts. So yeah, I was warned a lot about Twitter and social media and how it's garbage and it's toxic and everything. But I've really found so much obviously not like serious discourse all the time, but so much of the community um, that I found out there, and kind of like said cross pollination of ideas comes from like honestly typically a fairly small, and then getting larger concentric circles of people that I interact with on Twitter. So I am all for the medium. I will never be a Twitter hater.
Oh no, for sure. Yeah, like it's granted, I mostly like shit posts, but like I've had some great discourse with people, even people that wouldn't say that are like that I necessarily agree with, but I've had some fantastic discourse and have met some wonderful people. So yeah, I'm definitely I would well I always like say, oh fuck the bird app, I'm for it. I'm all for it. I've met some wonderful people on there.
Yeah, I got dragged to Twitter, kicking and screaming, but I'm okay with it now. I'm not on there much, but I kind of dig it. I've met some okay people there, but um so hey, so if you don't mind sharing, like what is your sort of cultural heritage, and how do you think that I mean, you already mentioned one example, but how do you think that has sort of informed your perspective on anarchism, if it has at all?
Yeah, definitely. So, just kind of like circling back to, um, that whole incident, with the Libertarian Party meeting. So, you know, I guess when we could kind of circle this back to like, I would take it back to, 08, 09. When I started I wasn't necessarily like super active, involved in like, um, with like activism or whatever. But I remember it was one of the second protests I ever went to back in 09. It wasn't like this huge protest, but there was remember, I don't know if you guys, obviously you guys remember when essentially Wall Street got fucking bailed. So this is a precursor to Occupy. And so one of my good friends at the time was, she identified as essentially as an ANCOM. So she's like, hey, you should come join us at the protest. And it was kind of cool because like you got to see different kinds of people. It wasn't just like leftists, there were like libertarians there. And um, it was a very small protest, so that was one of the last times that I went to in a while. But I remember after this all happened, just me thinking it's just like, like these motherfuckers are literally like sitting there and just like smugly like just like the bankers are essentially getting bailed out and we're just sitting here, everybody's losing like their houses, which at the time a lot of my family members started losing their jobs. um, and I know I have a couple of them that that are illegal, so it was really hard for people to find jobs at the time, and obviously it's going to be triple like harder for you if you don't have papers essentially. So some of these family members like got a lot of assistance from local communities, and I started getting involved with an organization in my hometown, um, with with just kind of like helping people find resources or getting them hooked up with pro bono attorneys. And the way that I found myself doing that is because we were desperately trying to find our way to help our family members. So I was doing that for a little bit, and so I think that kind of like started changing my perspective, because it was around obviously that time when I became an anarchist. When I started experiencing more within my community.
Yes, so that's sort of a prime example of this is cliche to say, but how state intervention sort of cuts off the I don't want know what the word is, the least off among us, or those in like the most precarious situations. Like it seems that state intervention, for obvious reasons, tends to hurt those people the most. So it's easy. I It's easy for me to see how things like what you're talking about is a much better use of our time to help those that need help or provide resources on, in a very sort of community activist or direct action sort of a way. And I don't know why this is not more obvious to even people like I'll give a lot of social democrats the sort of the benefit of the doubt, even though I couldn't disagree more with their politics, but I think that many of them at the very least want to help people who need help. It's just I don't think they make the connection that the state is soaked in blood and tramples on the weak and the poor. And anything that you have the state do, it's going to be, cops kicking in poor people's doors to enforce these sorts of things. So it's like I understand that, and we've had a lot of former social democrats on the show that were now anarchists, and for them it was an easy switch because they still come at it from like a place of empathy. They want to help those that need help. It's just a matter of a different strategy or a better method of doing this. And I had a question here and I completely just rambled, but I guess my question is do you think that there is sort of inroads with democratic socialists or people that are of that ilk who generally just want to help like the poor and those who are going through hard times for one reason or another, or can't find work, or the economy just shit the bed and they gave billions to bankers and the people lost their house or whatever. If could they be shown a better method of doing these things and through direct action and community outreach?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I feel like they can. Like I think my one issue with that particular groups, like the democratic socialists, and I'm not saying they're all like generally bad people, because I do feel like some of them generally want to help, is the fact that you like the ones that completely essentially just kind of like overshadow the ones that do want to help are what I call the photo op like activists. um the ones that are there and just want to help around the time, and they essentially they leave. And like we live in like a very like in not the best neighborhood, and so there were some protests that happened within the city that we live in, and people started building community gardens. And so I pass these gardens like probably a couple of times a week. I mean, I work from home, so I never really drive around too much, but it's really sad because the gardens, if I would say a few years ago, when the protests were happening for George Floyd, they were active. People were going into the community gardens and just working them. And then when around the time like we moved in here, it it's overgrown. So it's just like it started like such a cool thing. Like it was great that they were doing this, but I feel like essentially the only reason it was being done is just because it was the cool thing to do at the time. So um maybe I just have a really bad perspective of that particular crowd, but I feel like that's how I see them. Like they just want to do it because it's cool and it's great, and you want to help your community just because it's everybody's doing it, and then the communities that they're trying to help just get abandoned.
I would bet that that's more common than not, actually, because it really boils down to, if you want to outsource your responsibility to help the people in need and in your community, you don't really have the drive to do it yourself in the first place. And what I mean by outsource, if you want to have politicians do these things for you, instead of just doing it themselves, then you really don't have it in your heart to begin with. And this is not true for everyone. I'm not making like an absolute statement, but I think this is more common than people might think. And, we get accused of being, we as anarchists get accused of being, we hate the poor, cold, or whatever the thing. But I think that we, at least what I've seen, and maybe it's just the circles I run in, tend to be more actively doing things and helping people in our community and helping those less fortunate and building things, building new things, building new systems for support and food production and everything. So I think what you're seeing is, a lot of democratic socialists. I think a lot of them are from sort of upper middle class backgrounds. They've probably never gotten their hands dirty. And I don't think they really want to put the work in that is required to actually help communities and those that are less fortunate. I think they want to have the maid do it in some sense, right? At least that's been my experience. Is that sort of like does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I would pretty much say that sounds right. And I feel like, I mean, the one I would say like exception, granted, my mom hasn't been actively like, just doing things just because she's older now. But I mean, growing up, like my mom, she's retired now, but she was a bilingual teacher. So she was very active within, like helping like her students, helping parents, because there were parents that would obviously don't speak the language, or with after school activities or things like that. And so, and with that whole, when taking it back to when she got me involved into that, organization and just kind of assisting people. So, um, and my family doesn't come from like a very rich background either. So it was kind of like, I guess it's like when you're helping your own people in your own communities, or when you're helping people that are down, it's as opposed to where you get like the rich democratic socialists, that again, like you said, come from very, rich backgrounds and just don't want to really help. They just do it because it's a photo op, essentially.
Yeah, it looks good on their Facebook page or whatever for a day,
Yeah, well, when you're doing ground up grassroots kind of organizing and action. So actually you're doing action. I guess if you were just doing organizing, they probably would love doing organizing. But when you're doing action on a grassroots level, I think I'm not going to say that they're unwilling or not able to put in the work for that. But I think, having a motivating factor that you are kind of bucking the establishment or working outside the establishment in a way that like you ideologically value, and as opposed to, I guess, having so much acceptance, and I would say like nominal acceptance of like left-wing views in the establishment is very, very nominal, I think. But that, yes, the left is kind of perceived as, and again, perceived as ascendant in like the agenda or like the points that the centralized kind of welfare state in bevy of social programs and funding for social programs is increasing. We're in a trajectory where like we could get more of these programs, more assistance, more comprehensive programs and labor rights and stuff like that, which I don't know is actually the case. But seeing that if I'm a democratic socialist, seeing that, yeah, we value like the economies of scale and everything and economies of scope and stuff that come from having a large bureaucratic state that administers these programs, that really, I don't think they have as much value. Like when they're going out to do that kind of work when they do, or when they're doing community organizing or whatever, I don't think they really assign as much value to that, because it doesn't have the supposed economies of scale as the sort of policy, the sort of government policy that they're advocating for. And to some extent, that's also they're right in the sense that their goals kind of do require that economy of scale. But I think that people like us three uniquely value that kind of grassroots activity, or it's if you consider it type of direct action or whatever, but that sort of grassroots bottom up organizing and just doing action just to do it at whatever scale, at the local scale. And there's no problem with that. We aren't looking for a nationwide or continent-wide program to implement anything in particular, because we recognize the value and utility of what we're doing then and there.
Right. And I feel like at the end of the day, you really just obviously can't rely on the state to be able to provide assistance and fully do it for the right reason, because they don't. Like, for example, like just with my particular, situation where, we're trying to help our family members or whatever, it's just like they don't really care. They just don't, the state doesn't give a fuck. They want to just, essentially they're just there to fuck people, and that's all it really is. So you can't rely on the state for that assistance. So that's where you have to have, your own communities and just people coming together and helping each other out in that particular sense. However they can. It's just that's not something that you could just put responsibility onto the state, because it just wouldn't work.
So, I think that is more common. See, I grew up poor, so I remember what it was. I mean, we're poor in the middle of the sticks, so at least we're kind of able to grow our own food to some degree. But I think a lot of it comes down to class, man. Like, so I was raised poor, and politicians mostly weren't, right? A lot of activists, I think, or especially the type of activists we were talking about, you call them the photo op activists. A lot of them were not raised poor either. And I know how it is to go without and to be poor and to scrape by and to stress about money. And in turn, now that I'm more financially comfortable in my older years, we spend a lot of our time helping those that are falling on hard times. And it's just a matter of, I think that I'm better able to empathize with people that are falling on hard times, because I've fucking been there a bunch of times in my life, right? And I think a lot of politicians and social workers and all these mostly necessarily come from a sort of a more affluent class background, and they've probably never wanted for anything in their life. So to them, like, poor folks are just like numbers on a ledger somewhere, right? You're either, it's a voting block, or it's just numbers or folders or files going through a computer screen. You know what I mean? It means nothing to these people. They've never known what it's like to worry about where your food's coming from, So they don't have that same ability to empathize with, I don't think, with people who have fallen on hard times for whatever reason, that people who have or are currently through poor or have gone without are able to do. I think the most effective sort of, I don't want to say activists, but the effective, community organizers or people doing mutual aid groups in their networks or in their neighborhoods, or, just helping out the local, homeless peeps in your community. I think those, the most effective ones have probably been there themselves, right? Just because you know how it is. You're better. You have a like a true, like, from the heart connection, in some sense, like, because you've both been in that same situation. You can kind of like you can empathize better than some bureaucrat can, just seeing numbers on a computer screen, right? So I think there's a lot to that, and I think that's why sort of local bottom up organizing, community organizing, is more effective than, say, like the state trying to do anything for the poor. What do you think about that?
No, definitely agree. I feel like when you've been in that situation, when you are working within, your own community, where you're organizing within your own community, it's agreed, it's more effective than the government or the state trying to do it on your behalf, which was it was the funniest thing too, watching that, when all the protesting and organizing was going on during the George Floyd protest, because it was just like all these politicians who were calling for like organizing, like the shit libs, the shit lib politicians. They were calling for organizing, and it's kind of funny because they were calling for organizing just because they, because they saw these people, like, these are people who will vote for us. They didn't do it because they truly care, because honestly they don't give a fuck. So I agree. Organizing and just doing community action or helping out, it's more efficient when it comes from from your own community, when everybody comes and gets together and assists, as opposed to um, you know the state doing that for you.
So where's where was your family from originally, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. So my family, I, well, my parents were born in Mexico City, and I was born in Mexico City too.
Mm.
But they're originally from Jalisco, Mexico. And so, um, yeah, that's where they're from. My mom's side, I mean, it's not that I don't talk to my dad, but it's just, like, I don't see him as often because he doesn't live here. So,
Mhm.
so my family in Jalisco, they come from Jalisco, Mexico, and from my grandmother's, at least from my mom's side, like they're very they're they come from Wixarica, which is an Udo Aztec group. So that's where my family's from.
So I've seen from your posts that you've been kind of I don't know what the word is, just kind of getting familiar with your sort of cultural heritage or some spiritual beliefs. Are you familiar at all? Like, I know there's a lot of anarchists sort of down, Central and South America. Are you familiar with any in the that you've studied in sort of Mexico area?
Yeah, I'm obviously one of the most, well-known ones is Easy LL, like the
Hmm.
Zapatista movement.
Yeah.
I think that's because, and it's not granted, but like a lot of them, even Marcos himself, because I remember there was a few years ago, maybe in the 90s, a bunch of American anarchists were saying like, oh, like, like, Zapatistas are probably like, some sort of like socialist or like anarchist. And I remember it was kind of funny because Marcos, who, was lead at the time, he basically wrote a letter to this, it was like a distro. I gotta find it. I wish I could have had that on hand, but there was a distro that, that received the letter, essentially, where he stated that Zapatista movement is not just anarchist, it's not communist, it's not socialist. They have many different people from many different backgrounds, and essentially what brought them together is just the fact, that they're defending their territories and their lands. So it was interesting to see that, because it's just Americans usually assume, like, they see Zapatista, they're like, oh well, they're like, they're just anarchists or communists. No, there's just so many different groups and beliefs and people within that movement itself. It's there's there, I think he mentioned something within that letter, that there's teachers, there's priests, there's different people that you would never think would be in that organized movement that are involved in that movement.
Yeah, I think if anybody in America has even heard of the Zapatistas, they probably still kind of conflate it with like, not still, but they would conflate it in their heads with like Che or, some other sort of South American revolution. If they know what it is at all, and it has nothing to do with any of that. But I think a lot of Americans would sort of lump all that in together, right?
Yeah,
Um,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. From my understanding, the Zapatistas, it's highly decentralized and sort of a mesh network of co-ops in a sense. It's similar, I think, to even Rojava. But I'm not entirely familiar with it, but that's just kind of my understanding is it's highly decentralized.
Yes.
Yeah. So you could, that makes a lot of sense to me that it's a vast variety of different people with different beliefs, just sort of commingling in their own little territory there. But yeah, I'm a fan. I don't know a ton about it, but I like when any sort of people can carve out their own free territory. I like to see experiments like that. So cool. Do you have much more time? Oh, it's only been 45 minutes. Okay. Do you want to? You've been posting a lot lately about sort of your spiritual beliefs. You want to? Do you want to? Where did if you don't mind, what sort of? How long you been getting into that, and what got you sort of into spiritualism?
So a lot of it is just it's just been passed down. So like a lot of like the curandera, which is kind of like healing, like it's a little bit complex to explain, or like the whole like Mexican brujeria thing has been passed down from my family. A lot of it I learned it from my grandmother. Um, I took a long break from it.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what got you back into it? Or,
What got me back into it?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I do it. I wouldn't say get back into it, because honestly, what happened with a lot of it. Sorry, I'm just shifting around here. Essentially, a lot of it I just didn't share. It just wasn't something that I felt the need to share. So essentially, like, I just didn't think that I had to share. But as I'm recently, I'm like, why do I have to hide this? Like, I don't feel like I need to hide. If anything, I should probably post about it. And, because people always have questions, and there's always like things that are, misconstrued within spiritualism, So I was like, okay, I'm just going to start Santa Muerte posting. So yeah, I think I started getting more into it a few years ago, and started practicing again, because this is just more of like a personal thing. But if I was married to like this super Republican rightoid who just wasn't into it. Like, he would just be like, oh, I don't want that shit around my house and blah blah. So I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm not gonna have that. And just as essentially like a few years before my divorce, I was like, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm gonna practice and just practice my beliefs and start getting my altars back up, and fuck it. So that's kind of how it went.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you have the freedom to do that now. Something I've noticed, and I don't know what it is, and I've talked about this with a few people, but it seems like, I've always been kind of interested into spiritualism and the occult, and I too, like, sort of just put that aside for a while and just sort of focused on material things, but I don't mean like just stacking money, but just like making quote unquote real changes in my life and community rather than focusing on that sort of thing. And I sort of put that on a shelf for a long time too. But something I've noticed, and I sort of got back into it a bit here recently, a few years back maybe, but I've noticed it becoming very common amongst anarchists. And a lot of, a friend of ours, Brian Savin, he's super into Kabbalah. I know another friend of ours, Shane, super into like Hermetic teachings and the occult and stuff. And I kind of dabble in a little bit of all that. And got a few more friends that are just like super, and I don't mean occult as in like spooky bad. I just mean like ancient mystic teachings, right? But I've been noticing it more and more, and I don't know. Me and my friend Brian Savin, we made the joke. It's the age of Aquarius, right? It's just that there's something changing in the culture at large that makes it sort of more acceptable now. I don't know. And maybe that's it. Maybe more people are just more anarchist. I mean, are just feeling more comfortable with that. I think a lot of maybe anarchists sort of got burned out on like this, what I would call like hyper rationalism in a sense. Maybe COVID scared the shit out of a lot of people, and they had to find, the proverbial come to Jesus moment. I don't know, but is this been the case? Is this something that you see as well? Has this been like the case for you? Are you noticing more of that? And why, if so, why do you think that is?
Honestly, no, I could definitely say the same thing because just thinking about some of the people that I knew that identified as anarchists when in my early 20s, a lot of them were like atheists, and they self-identified as atheists because obviously there's always been this whole belief with like a perfect example, like with the Vatican, like you just think of like a lot of people were just angry with the fact that, when they started getting into like atheism, and I know a lot of them were Christian before this. It's just that resentment that you have things like the Vatican, like walls plated with gold, but then you have the same people that, you have your own followers that are donating money who could barely make it afloat, so it's just been that resentment against, the church and the state. So I think now, as the years have gone by, I feel like people are finding a way to become more spiritual, especially within, the anarchist communities. Like, because I've seen it so much. Like, it's just like people that I didn't even know were spiritual, like, are spiritual. It is something like that. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, it's awesome, though. It's great to see that people are coming back into those beliefs. And honestly, I think COVID was the factor. And I don't think it was so much the fact that a lot of people were like, oh my God, I'm going to die from COVID, or, that sense. It's just like everybody was isolated. A lot of people, lost a lot of family members. And I wouldn't say to COVID, I would just say lost family members, like that would stop talking to them because of their political beliefs, things like that. So I think that whole isolation really brought it back up to life, because a lot of people were seeing like, oh shit, like this government's overstepping more than they usually do. I mean, granted, we know this, but people started realizing this. So I feel like it's just a lot of things happen, but I do truly feel like COVID had a lot to do with people coming back into their spiritual beliefs.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, because I think COVID helped a lot of people reprioritize a lot of things in their life, not just like spiritual versus material, but like the work versus leisure relationship that they had there. What did they really want in life, right? Now that they were sort of home and working from home, they got a little more time to like sort of catch their breath and think about things, and maybe they're spending more time with their family because they're not working as much or whatever. So that I think COVID reprioritized a lot of things for a lot of people, and to me, that's like the one plus side I've seen out of this whole COVID thing, is that people are like, oh wait, maybe I don't have to work at a fucking office, and drive into the office every day 45 hours a week for the rest of my life until I die. Maybe there's more to life than this, right? Maybe I can spend more time with my kids. Maybe I can learn yoga, or maybe I can work from home and I can still do, I can do yoga in the middle of the day, or I can pray, or I can I can learn, start reading philosophy or Buddhism or whatever the thing is, and there's just, I think there's more to life than just your job, just grind and grind and grind. So I think that changed a lot of the perspective of a lot of people, and I think mostly for the better, really. Also, I think it was very clear how much the the system, the the rational people among us, how much all of that failed us, right? And so I think that caused a lot of people to look elsewhere for information, but also their source of truth, what all of this means, alternative lifestyles, alternative healthcare, all of these things kind of sort of all coalesce together. And I think you're right about COVID. I really think I think it was overall actually a shift for the better. Like the government overstepped and got a lot more powerful. Okay, great. They do that every single time. I've been around long enough. I've seen it happen. Every time there's a problem, that always happens. So that's awful, but that's just kind of how the state and time progresses. That's just going to happen. But the plus side is I think a lot of people really, like I said, reprioritized everything about like um how much will they work. uh, they don't want to be like a cog in the machine anymore. A lot of people moved out in the middle of nowhere and are working remotely now with their feet up, and their kids are playing in the garden and whatever else, and it's all great. Or they got a different job, or they started working for themselves and making widgets in their garage and selling them on eBay or whatever the thing, just to restructure their work. What do they call that? The work life balance or whatever they call it in on the headlines now. But I think that's overall, and yeah, a lot of people had more time to just figure out what it is that they believe, and that's good too. That's better than slaving away at some job forever. So I think do you think it was like a positive shift overall, um, like going forward for the aftermath of COVID?
I mean, I have mixed feelings because I just feel, the whole like the line in the sand analogy, like I feel like they were trying to, essentially the state was just trying to see how much they could get away with, so it just makes me nervous for the future, as in the sense of trying to see what more they could get away with. But at the same time, it did have a very positive impact on a lot of people, so when, from finding spiritual beliefs to like the whole like remote working, or finding better jobs. With me, I worked in healthcare when I was in COVID, and I had a really good job. But they started the whole like vax mandate, and they're like, well, like you have until this date, and I'm just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm quitting. I'm not staying in this job. And it wasn't so much because, I feel like people should have the choice to do it whether they want to or not. My whole thing with it was the fact that you are forcing good employees to get, something that they don't want, whether it's, they don't believe it's the correct thing for them. In my opinion, I'm young and healthy. I don't need it. So it made me realize that I was slaving away for a company that could just dispose of me whenever the fuck they felt like it. So I was like, you know what? I'm quitting. I'm not coming back to this job. Don't reach out to me again. So I took another job in, a completely different industry. And to this day, I have the choice whether I want to go to the office or if I want to work from home, which is been fucking awesome because I get to work from home all the time, right? But and I know not a lot of people have that option, but I feel like a lot of people were able to prioritize and their life and work and life balance. Essentially that's the reason a lot of these employers can't find people anymore, because people realize their self-value as of who they are as a worker.
Yeah, and bingo. If I'm an optimist, that's the plus side of things, right? Um, people realized their time is valuable. They realized their skills are valuable, they realized that they're fucking needed, right? So they can they got more leverage to sort of write their own destiny in a sense. At least more so than they did before. So, yeah, you're right. The state and the corporate giants and whatever, they tried to grab more power, and they were able to do a lot of that for a while. And in some sense, they've got more control over things than they did before. But man, I remember before 9/11, like this is how it's always been. They're always going to do that. So like the best we can do is carve out what freedoms we possibly can. And if we're looking at the best side, like you're actually an example of like what you just said. Is like now, yeah, you had a decent job, but now you're working from home, and you can like I don't feel like going to the fucking office today, and like there's a certain freedom in that, and I think there was a cultural shift in some sense about how people thought about their jobs and their self-worth and valuing their time, and I don't know, seeing their kids grow up or spending more time with their friends or family, or getting a hobby that they actually, finding doing something that they actually enjoy doing, right? Rather than just something they do because they have to work, So I think that is a signifier of a cultural shift, but maybe it's a flash in the pan, and this will all go back to the way it was in another year or something. But to me, I don't know, that's a good thing. If we're looking at what good came out of that, like that's one of the few good things. Nothing changed. I was working at a job. I quit. I just started working for myself, and I've been doing that ever since. But it wasn't because of COVID, and my life changed very little during COVID. But I think for a lot of people, it changed a lot of things. I think even more so than they realize. And like you just said, you lost your job because of the controls, but now you have a job. And I don't know your situation personally, but that sounds more appealing to me, to be able to work from home and choose whether you actually want to go in and commute, and you can, do what you need to do at the house. And also you don't you don't have to drive in the commute. You don't have to like put pants on if you don't want to, you know what I mean? Like there's something significantly better. Like there's more leisure in that than there is in like slaving away at the office all day. Right. I don't know. To me, that seems better, but I don't know. That's my personal thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is, and I feel like, and I feel like it's probably going to stick, because I feel like people are realizing their value as employees. Like where you have that fantastic term, the wage slave, and it's just like you don't have to, you could choose, where you want to work. There's so, and again, the job market's pretty open. Like for example, in my industry, like um they kind of have to have you work from home, because there are other companies that are literally posting that as the perk for my particular line of work. So it's just like I don't really foresee it changing. Um, and honestly, I think people should have the choice. If you're obviously productive at home, you should be able to work from home if you want to, and or people are choosing better hours if they're working on site for whatever industry they work for. But I feel like that work-life balance has gotten better, honestly.
Yeah, I mean that's a kind of a thing that I've been saying throughout the time we've been doing this podcast, is like the technology is there, and society is there, and mostly technology and the capabilities and the implementation of that technology is definitely there to give us a lot freer, more comfortable lives, more prosperous lives, or lives where we have like more disposable, income or the equivalent, or like we can afford much more comfort for much less. And I mean, admittedly, like this system that we live on, the system or like succession of systems or whatever that we've lived under over the past few hundred years has worked that way tremendously. But like at the same time, you can't deny that. So the narrative that I think that you should have instead is that like so much of it is still gate kept from us by just the circumstances, and just I mean I can't even analyze like all the things that were maybe keeping that. And some of it of course is the technology, but like when technology is developed, that obviously under the conditions of a pandemic allowed like for this mass shift towards this, what was originally a slow creep at the very more top level jobs towards work from home. But when there was this like outside pressure, we ended up with the kind of paradigm shift that allows us a lot more freedom and a lot more, self-determination, at least for, some lines of work. But that really with a lot of economic growth, what you actually see is that the gains are so concentrated at the top, even though in the long-term trend has been like we've obviously living much, much better lives than people did, just decades ago. So it's really good. And I think this opens up a lot of opportunities for more people to, work from home and to do things which gives them more time. Let's face it, work is something we do because we have to do. And it's a responsibility to bring in cash from the outside, economy. It's not exactly the freest, most libertarian thing. Sure, you can work. Are we coerced to work for a wage? Well, if you buy that argument to any extent, if we are noticeably just by changing economic conditions and like the changing outside circumstances, less coerced to work, less coerced in our work, and we are more freer, and we do have more freedom to voluntarily work in the way we choose and how we choose and the job we choose and everything. Given that like obviously the statist economy is shaky in its own ways, it's tremendously beneficial because ultimately, like, for what end do we want this freedom? We want to be able to work on our own projects. We want to like have our own property, work for our own projects, choose our own ends and work towards them, and then like gain resources from the outside world that allow us to basically work towards our own projects, whatever they are, whether they're hobbies or our family, or like putting something away for your retirement, or building a homestead, whatever it is that you're doing, or just living a comfortable life, which is I think everybody's to some extent. And so anything that allows us to move in that direction, or allows us to move into a direction where we're more able to do side hustles or part-time jobs, or like non-commercial products. Maybe you're doing like a co-op or like a community garden or something, or maybe you full-on self-employment. I think anything that helps us move into that direction, because economic growth is great and technological advancement is great, but to what end? It should be to the end of like human flourishing and freedom. And I think that's I think we've had an odd boost in that direction. And I hope it continues. I have a lot longer. I hope to live on this earth a lot longer, and I want it to be more comfortable than not. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't you say that I think we've achieved a certain amount of real freedom that we could actually appreciate as like libertarian anarchist types, just like material freedom, even if the laws didn't change? And I think that's kind of the model going forward. Would you agree with that or not?
No, I agree. And I think people are starting to just become a little bit more self-reliant, like, and I think, a lot of it happened with COVID. Like, I learned to do a lot of things that I didn't do before, because obviously I had more time. So like I didn't know a thing about canning. I started canning like fucking crazy during COVID. I didn't know a thing about gardening. I started doing a lot of gardening, started growing, my own vegetables, and just experimenting with, like plants, and like got really big into like growing poppies, and, just, growing my own, just ran like my zucchinis and everything, and just canning those, and just picked up a lot of things that I didn't know how to do. And it was crazy because I'm like, I could have been doing this a long time ago, but I didn't have the time. I didn't have the option to do it. And I mean, I wouldn't say the option, but I didn't have the knowledge, and I just didn't have the need for it until basically once COVID happened. I'm like, oh, this would be something fun to learn. So yeah, I feel like people are, realizing, again, back to the point of becoming more self-reliant and, just realizing that they don't have to essentially abide by certain laws, and you see that a lot, which is awesome within like the 3D printing community, that they do that, like, or people within the gun community as well. Like, it's just like, I'm not going to turn my brace in. So it's cool. I think I've seen that a lot. I would definitely agree with having that much more freedom, just being, within your, being self-reliant. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be a lesson that we want freedom. If you like advocate for political freedom or something like that, then it's got to be for an end. It's not just nothing political is really an end for itself. So yeah, I think I can really appreciate what you're talking about. Can't work from home, but there's a whole lot I can do with technology, and it's just, basically our narrative has always been like, yeah, we appreciate this technology, but like the benefits of it so often I think have been like gatekept.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And it's for example, like my partner, he doesn't work from home. Like, he has another line of job, but it's pretty funny because it's like he has the options now where he could essentially just like works 4 days a week and just rest like 3 days, and it's just not an option that a lot of people had before, and I feel like a lot of jobs are becoming that like that. So I think, even for somebody that doesn't work from home, or it doesn't work, within using that technology, there's such a desperate need for workers within the markets that that essentially because people are just, they're not willing to sacrifice their time to put in like bazillion hours that they don't want to work.
Yeah, and also you can also I'll give you an example of what I mean. My business, I'm self-employed. My business boomed during COVID and has been ever since. So I can essentially charge what I want to in some sense, because there's so much work going on that most people can't even get anyone to call them back. They can. I do landscaping, and they're like, I've called 50 different landscapers. I can't get anybody to call me back, and like all I got to do is call back, and I can just charge mostly whatever I want. And then, but yes, that means yay, I'm making more money, but that also means like I have more leeway to be able to sort of choose my own schedule or do other projects here at the homestead. We do a lot of gardening and canning ourselves here, or it just gives you more options, right? You can do more things that you want to do, or improve yourself or whatever. And, we're always learning new skills and new hobbies and projects around here too. And it takes money to do those things. So, it's weird to say, but money in some sense is like freedom and time. So, yeah, I think the state, and we'll say the powers that be or the corporate class or whoever, I think they overplayed their hand during COVID. This is why I'm not so much worried about the government overreach, in the sense that I think they overplayed their hand. So the end result, I have the same opinion about MK Ultra and the CIA dumping a bunch of LSD on people in the 60s, because the end result was like the anti-war movement for Vietnam. So I think they overplayed their hand with COVID, and the corporate companies and such tried to control so much of their workers' lives that it backfired. And so now you have all these people where the power is like the economic power or the bargaining power is starting to shift back to the workers or the little guy, or however you want to classify that class. But Um, I think the power is shifting back that way, and to me, that is actually the result of the government and the corporations' reaction to COVID. So they, in some weird roundabout way, shot themselves in the foot. Am I making any sense here at all?
Damn, that's so profound, though. I mean, the whole thing we've been talking about, like culminating what you just said. I mean, think about it. Like, how many people do we talk to have this whole narrative about like the UN and Agenda 21 and like the WEF, and they're gonna make you eat the bugs and live in a pod and everything, and they're gonna abolish all property and all this other stuff, and it's satanic or whatever. And they're gonna basically this the it's the new version of course, this basically like globalist conspiracy that totalitarianism is around the corner. There's always a fear that like true like absolute totalitarianism is around the corner, but like what an amazing kind of take on this thing that I think people are universally, people in our community universally have kind of a fairly similar reaction to, which is the COVID lockdowns and everything. Certainly an alternative take. I think it's pretty profound, and I think we all agree that that's been our rough assessment of like, rough assessment of the thing in hindsight, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, and I could definitely see it in that way, and obviously I'm still obviously, oh, I will always have that, you have to have that healthy distrust in, in the government. But yeah, no, I could definitely see it that way, like I just kind of did backfire, because now you just have people like, it's just funny because I remember like pre-COVID, you just had like situations where like many jobs were like testing for drugs, like just in, it's like now like every time, and like I see, it's funny because I'll just see random job posting, it's just like no drug test. It's just like what the fuck. It's great to see, love to see it.
It's like, we don't even care if you're doing blow in the bathroom. Just please show up. We don't care at all.
So true. It's amazing to see it. I just, it's been my favorite take about like the whole like COVID, lockdown. Just, and it's true, it did backfire on them. It's great.
It's weird thinking of myself as an optimist, but I kind of am in some sense. Like I think, okay, yeah, I'm a nihilist, right? So I'm supposed to be all doom and gloom, right? But no, I think like it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Like the state's gonna keep getting gnarly, and the corporate structure is gonna keep being fascistic, right? But in some weird fucking way, I think things are gonna get better. And what did Foucault call it? He called it the shadow or the cracks. Like it's going to become easier to carve out spaces of liberation, I think, for people like us. When people that might not even be necessarily anarchists, but people that are just fed up with this fucking system, or it's failed them in some way, or they're tired of the rat race, or whatever the thing, and it's going to become much easier in the future, post COVID, to carve out spaces of liberation and prosperity for just your average person. You don't even have to be rich anymore. You just find a little space, or a fucking whatever it is you want to do. Find out what it is you want to do, and it's go do it. And I think that's just going to get easier and easier and less costly going forward. So I personally am pretty optimistic about the future. I don't know.
Right. And I honestly, like, it's funny that you mentioned that, because just, I have family members that have always been like diehard Democrats, or, we have another one that's Republican. But it's funny to see them have discussions when, when the family meets, like they're like, there just has to be a better way, like, like the economy is flopping, and they're just becoming more aware of what's going on, and not from the perspective of what the news is telling you, which to me it's kind of insane. I'm just like, or you guys would not have said this a few years ago. This is crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, that's super positive. You know what I mean? Like, if you can, it's just that that crack in the veneer of the state. You know what I mean? Where it's like, wait a minute, maybe this is all fucked. You know, like that's step one. You know what I mean? So like, I'll take that. Uh, I'll tell you, I've always gotten along with the people that are like, I don't know what the word is for it, but that seems to be like the vast majority of people, right? But they're like just super apolitical, and they're just like, no, the system's fucked. I'm just gonna go fucking drink beer and ride quads. I don't care. And, you know, like that's just to me that is I think there's way more of those people than anybody who like has any sort of faith in the system, right? I think that's actually the vast majority of people are like, no, fuck the Democrats, fuck the Republicans. I don't trust all politicians are crooks or whatever the thing. They're not like anarchists or anything like that. They don't care about politics at all. But I met a ton of these people in California. People think of California as all liberal and stuff, but I know a bunch of people that they just didn't care at all about politics at all, philosophy at all. They just wanted to go shoot guns in the desert, ride their sand rails, and drink Bud Light. You know, that was what they didn't care about anything else. And to me, those are fucking our allies in some weird way. In the sense that I will take that over like some the theory nerd in some sense, you know, because it's just going to become easier even for people like that to just go do what they want to do in life. And you don't need to know like a bunch of fucking theory to just go do what you want to do. You know what I mean? So to me, there's a like even more so than like big L libertarians, like those people are weirdly like ideological. No, that's not the right word. There's a bridge there. They're allies in some weird way. I don't know. I don't know where
I agree with that. No, I agree with that. I've really been shifting my views more towards like recently. So well after starting the podcast, I've been really shifting my views more towards like being having my I don't know how to work this at all, man, but having my views kind of contiguous or like relatable to like normal people. That, you know, ideological weirdos are great, but you know, I don't think we're I'm not trying to exist in a place so far like, oh, I'm so radical, I'm outside the norm. But I mean, I think in the end we're trying to reach, or we're trying to, you know, build a world of normalcy, I guess, out of what maybe we consider maybe normalcy in the sense of like a normalcy bias, but maybe is designed by policy and by decision. So I can relate 100%.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you just can't stay stuck, and I think it's people that that are anarchists or libertarian or whatever that are starting to just hang out, just relate more to the again the apolitical person, because it's just got to get out of that echo chamber. You can't just be hearing your own ideas while there are people who probably agree with you, but they don't want the government to overstep and overreach, but they're just, again, they're not into like theory, or they don't have like a party or something that they align themselves with, because they just really don't give a fuck. They just want to live and let live. That's all they want.
Well, we should start wrapping this up before too long. It's old and it's past my bed. I'm old and it's past my bedtime. See, I don't even know what's going on. But do you have any like parting thoughts? You know, something unique to being a woman yourself and anarchism as a whole, like, or who are some of these famous women anarchists that you draw from? Do you find um, yourself more comfortable around other women anarchists? Like, what is there there was a vibe I was going for, but I can't think of it. But what do you think any parting wisdom, I guess we'll say, as a woman anarchist? Like, do you think there's something that we don't understand?
Um, honestly, I really don't. I've never been in the sense of like I know a couple from Twitter or whatever, but I've never really met too many women anarchists within outside the internet. So I do have a
Uh-huh.
couple friends that I know, but I feel like um again, and then just starting with that thought of like I've met a lot of women who are apolitical. They're not into theory, but I think I don't know. I feel for the most part, I like guys within the community have been pretty understanding. With and I wouldn't say that I just never really had a really bad experience with like having a male anarchist not understand something. Like I think
Mm.
for the most part, I just haven't. But I really wouldn't say I have any like parting thoughts or wisdom, but I really appreciate you guys having me on, and thank you. It was like my first time doing a podcast. I'm just like, what am I doing?
Wait, this is your first podcast ever?
Yeah.
Woohoo!
That's
All right. Well,
crazy.
see, it wasn't bad at all. Listen, this is like a weird thing. You know what I mean? Like, podcasting is a weird, unnatural, awkward thing. Like, you're trying to like, okay, ready, go, have a conversation, which never happens in real life. So it's like, it definitely feels awkward. It still feels awkward to me sometimes, and we've been doing this for 2 years. So like, you did fine for your first time, so don't worry about that at all. The feeling nervous and awkward is definitely the norm. I would be weirded out by the person who did not feel weird and awkward by this sort of thing. So no, to us too, we still don't, like I said, we still don't know what we're doing. We've been doing this for like 2 years. We just get on the mic and talk, and people keep listening. So I don't know, but no, you did fine. Thanks for coming on. It was a blast. Do you like Declare?
I do.
I would have guessed.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say as a parting thought. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, that was perfect. That was perfect. I mean, is she your favorite woman anarchist or favorite anarchist at all?
I mean, I'm not much like of a theory nerd. I
Right.
mean, I do read theory, but I really, really, really enjoy Emma Goldman.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan, actually.
I definitely dig some Emma Goldman. I like Declare's writing. There's
Yeah,
something about
yeah.
her writing that is it doesn't even matter what she's talking about. It's just like the way she writes, I really enjoy.
Yeah, she is a really good writer too.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, her writing's fantastic. But yeah,
it's probably because she was also a poet, so like even her like non-poetry reads like poetry in some weird way. I don't know, or like prose. So I really dig her. I like Goldman too. She's awesome, but I like Goldman because she remained consistent after the Bolshevik Revolution.
yes, exactly. Yeah,
That's what I love about her. She was like, "Oh, the fuck this," and like, this is not what I signed. Like, it was an affront to her own ideals and principles, and I respect the fuck out of her for that.
yeah. Agreed. She's great. But yeah, no, sorry. I don't have like a parting thought or anything like that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Well, thanks for coming on. Do you want people to find you? Do you want to plug a thing?
I mean, if they want.
All right, throw out your Twitter handle in.
Okay, Oh.
Go ahead.
Does that go in like the comments or on the chat?
No. Just give it. Just what do you mean? No, just tell people where they can find you.
Oh yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter.
Oh, she just left. What happened? She just hit a button.
Maybe she went to load her Twitter account and she dropped that. There she is.
And she's back. All right, right on.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
I hit the back button. I'm using my phone right now, so I hit the back button, and in the
oh
process
yeah.
just kind of kick myself out. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, if you guys want to find me on Twitter, it would be under Uwu Haina, and that's how you could find me. If you could find me.
Right on. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on. This is a really good conversation. So you did just fine for your first time. This was awesome. And everybody listening, be excellent to each other. And we'll see you all next time. Penguin, you close us out.
Yeah, find us on Twitter as well. Agora_pod. You can interact with both of us hosts, or go to our Telegram. Sec, how do they go to our Telegram?
That's a good question.
Or Discord, whatever. Just go to one of those.
Hold on. It's just Agora the podcast on Telegram. Yes. Agora the podcast on Telegram. The Agora podcast on Telegram.
Awesome. Okay, we'll do that. Interact with us on Twitter. We're all on Twitter. That seems to be the place to be. So thanks for joining us, and peace out.
All right, peace.
Bye.